Hello everyone, Likely Matt here. In today's video I wanted to give a brief history on Sonic the Hedgehog because there's a lot to unpack when it comes to this franchise, with the movies and the games, the TV shows, and even the consoles themselves. But I'm not doing it alone this time. That's right, for the first time in Likely Matt history, we have gotten to collab with another YouTuber, the Zman Show. So him and I wanted to talk about how the Sonic franchise has had its ups and downs in the past. A little summary, if you will. So, without further ado, let's dive into the first part of this video.
Get Joe Montana free, Pat Riley free, Buster Douglas free, Super Monaco GP free, or Collins free. What Nintendo?
The Sega Mega Drive, or as most know it, the Sega Genesis, was Sega's main answer to Nintendo because, as we're all very much aware, back in the 90s, Nintendo and Sega were competitors, and at the time it made a whole lot of sense. But Sega needed a way to prove that they were the best competitors for Mario at the time. So they needed their own mascot, because obviously Nintendo has stuff like Zelda and Pokemon and Kirby, but the main driving force has gotta be Mario. So what Sega did was create Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog came out in 1991, 2 years after the Sega Genesis, and oh boy did this game blow up. I mean, the whole marketing of Sega does what Nintendo don't is a very funny title. Plus, this game managed to take the platformer genre and completely reinvent it, having great visuals, great music, high stakes speed. It made the platformer more unique, even if it was mainly just Green Hill Zone that contained any speed. But overall, I still think that Sonic 1 is a great game, and this was a great introduction. I mean, it was so fun, and the games could only get better as they go along. Despite that though, it did really well in the US. I mean, his whole design kinda has that vibe with the behind the scenes and how they designed him. But in Japan, the Sega Genesis and Sonic 1 barely sold at all. It is rather disappointing because that's where Sonic originates from, and it is baffling with these sales numbers. But fortunately, that didn't matter. Sonic 2 came out, even better than the first one, and making absolute bank. Sonic 3 and Knuckles, absolutely screaming quality, and it made even more money than the last few titles. Oh my god, the Sega Genesis era was a great day for Sonic. I mean, it was an absolute peak for him, and it was truly the stage where Sonic was a perfect competitor for Mario. Can't say the same about everything else beyond that, though. So, even though the Sega Genesis is one of Sega's most popular consoles, we did get a couple in between the Dreamcast and the Genesis. And one of them was the Sega Saturn. And I'm gonna be completely honest, the console did really well in Japan. Hold on, that does not. Is that right? Oh, yeah, apparently it actually did sell really well in Japan. Not because of Sonic, though. No. Apparently the Knights game that came out on the Sega Saturn did really well. And since it was made by the Sonic team, most people were confused by what that meant. It's kind of baffling how little people know about Sonic today, but it's also annoying back then that they didn't know anything about Sonic in the home country. But yeah, most of the Sega Saturn games were not great for Sonic. I mean, Sonic R was a janky, unfinished mess with slippery controls like butter on a saucepan, and to be perfectly honest, I think the Sega Saturn was probably the weakest era for Sonic as a whole. However, again, it did sell really well in Japan, but in the US it sold horribly, so 50-50. Could be worse. The Sega Dreamcast is the Nintendo 64 equivalent of Sega, and like Nintendo, they opened the gates with Sonic Adventure 1. And oh boy, did this game sell really well. It was a huge step up, introducing Sonic into the 3D format properly, instead of what the Sega Saturn tried to do. Sonic Adventure 1 was so unbelievably good. It made the people in the West happy because they got a cool action game with 3D and Sonic. Pretty great package. and people in Japan were happy with the JRPG elements, the story, and the giant kaiju that is perfect chaos. Everyone was happy with this game, and it could only get better. Along with the Sega Dreamcast and Sonic Adventure 1, another game came out in the early 2000s, and oh boy, Sonic Adventure 2 was the best Sonic game we could have asked for. Unfortunately, despite the fact that the game sold well, the console itself wasn't doing so good. And Sega quickly realized that they couldn't keep going through the console market like this, since the Sega Genesis did pretty well in the US but not well in Japan, and their last console, the Sega Saturn, didn't even sell all that well. So, unfortunately, this was the last Sega console, but on the bright side, we did get two of the best 3D Sonic games we've had in a long time. Unfortunately, after that, the most part, Sonic games were kind of on a downfall. I mean, Sonic 06 was a god-awful mess, and even though Sonic Unleashed was absolutely amazing, it still didn't quite resonate well with fans because of the werehog stuff. And honestly, we haven't really gotten any certified bangers like the adventure games, so Sonic was kind of in a bad place for a long time. But fortunately, things were looking up, because we were about to get something, an era of Sonic that would change everything, that would solidify as one of the best eras, and a really needed refresher. After some pretty great stuff, but all around having a mixed response, being surrounded by all this crap. But with the 2020s on the horizon and a potential Sonic movie being rumored, things were looking up, with the Renaissance era coming with the first ever Sonic the Hedgehog movie. And I'll let the Z-Man talk about that part.
What's going on, guys? Z-Man here. When the first Sonic movie was in development, it took a while before we saw anything about it, until we got a peek at the first poster.
That's disgusting.
That didn't inspire confidence, but then the trailer dropped. We didn't have to worry about it anymore. Now we were sure this movie was gonna suck. But luckily, after Hollywood got to experience the wrath of Sonic fans, they got to work fixing Sonic. And they did. So instead of a terrible one-off movie that everybody laughed at for years, we got a pretty decent family movie based on our favorite hedgehog. It may not have been extremely action-packed or filled with Sonic characters, but it was exactly what the first movie needed to be to satisfy existing Sonic fans and make new ones. Besides, we could save that action for the second movie. It's in Sonic 2 where the scales tipped, where the family comedy started to go down and the Sonic action started to go up. Introducing two more characters to the movieverse, Tails and Knuckles, we got a much bigger adventure, looking much more like a video game movie than the first one did, also expanding the movie's universe and lore. The hype around Sonic 2 was huge, but it was nothing compared to the hype after its post-credit scene. At the time of recording, the most recent Sonic movie is Sonic 3, introducing Shadow and following the story of Sonic Adventure 2. This one was easily the most anticipated of the three. Where the second movie took the Sonic action to a new level, Sonic 3 took it off the charts, building the Sonic movie world even more, finding a pretty much perfect balance between the humans and CG characters, and beautifully adapting one of the most popular games in the series. And then again in the post-credits, building towards what's next with Metal Sonic and Amy. So when the movie started, Sonic was not in a good place. But as the movies progressively got better, so did the games. While of course the movies aren't making the games better, they are reawakening the love of Sonic in existing fans and even creating new fans as well. I couldn't see the franchise without them now.
Thank you, Z-Man, for that lovely piece of information. So, obviously with the movies, the games actually decided to go on a bit of an incline of quality. We got Sonic Frontiers, Superstars, and Sonic X Shadow Generations. Now, to be completely honest, this was a huge sign that the Sonic community could finally get some high quality content. Sure, things could go south any day now. I mean, we all know that Sonic can go in and out of good and bad eras, but at the moment, I think fans can rest easy knowing that at the very least, we're not going to be getting any of the crap we got back in the early 2000s or 2010s. So, with stuff like Frontiers, Superstars, and Sonic X Shadow Generations, I'm pretty confident that they can even build upon those games and make some even better stuff for us fans later on. As for the future, it's uncertain, but I know that we're at least going to be getting some amazing stuff in the future. The new Sonic Racing game is going to be coming out soon, and the Sonic 4 movie's coming out in 2027. Things are looking up. This has been Likely Matt on the Z-Man Show, signing off.